Again, I'm at the Arboretum today. Trails here. I'm at the Arboretum today. This is one of the dogwoods we have along the front line of the garden area. Just wanted to show you a picture of it and a reminder that even though we think of flowers as the things growing in our gardens next to our houses or elsewhere, but trees also do flower. In here we have the flowers of the dogwood tree, and just want to try to show you one up close. But again, all plants have flowers in regards to doing seed production and creating their next generations, which is in the garden area at the Arboretum. This is one of the mints in one of the displays. When you come here, I actually encourage you to come and stroke it. Smell your hand for an odor, but also when you touch it, roll the mint in your fingers, the stem, and you'll notice that it's different than some of the other plants because mints have four-sided structures to their stems. One of the features of the Arboretum is our two-story gazebo. It is actually over 100 years old. It was brought to this property to be a centerpiece in the gardens area from one of the old family farms in Hunterdon County. It can be rented and used as a centerpiece for weddings and other events that can be booked here at the Arboretum. Again, walk upstairs, check out the roof, because again, if you're looking for wildlife, it is a place where I have historically found bats during the spring and summertime. Inside the gazebo, you'll find the cigar-shaped mud nest of mud daubers. They're in the wasp family. They're actually a beneficial wasp, preying on other undesirable insects. So you can recognize a mud dauber from the other wasp because the abdomen, kind of what's the tail of an insect, is actually very thin compared with a plump ending, whereas the other wasps have an abdomen that's not on like a stem coming out of the thorax. Okay, I'm at the Arboretum Pond. It's always an area worth checking out. During the spring and summer times, you'll find bullfrogs, green frogs, maybe even a water snake around the edge of the pond. The area is always usually active with wildlife. Northern flicker, phoebe, chickadees, and many of the other little songbirds can be found in this area. You may recognize these as deer tracks. Deer, of course, are very common as well as their tracks. But again, the Arboretum has a few muddy spots, so it's worth paying attention to when you come across them and scan the areas, because many of the mammals go unseen in Hunterdon, leaving only their footprints or their scat remains behind. Now, the one thing you can say from deer prints is it will tell you the direction they were walking. And again, because the points are not pushed in deep and separating, we know that this print of the deer, or I'm sorry, when these prints were made, the deer was just walking around. Adjacent to it is the evidence of a dog. Again, a lot of walkers at the Arboretum and pets come along, and they're going to leave their prints as well. I'm on the two-line trail in the oak grove just beyond the photo bridge. And the thing is, the Arboretum is an artificial habitat. What I mean by that is it was a working nursery, and this is one of the few areas that really shows off the nursery history, because if you line up on one tree, you'll see that they all line up in nice straight lines. And again, this is indication of manual planting by the arborist of the old Arboretum. If you step to the side, you'll notice there's a whole line of trees that fall into that line. And again, to show that they were all planted by man. You can also find some vernal pools in here, the old holes from when trees were harvested and sold to the public years ago. Okay, if I'm on the right spot, in the center you might notice a little bit of a white crescent. If it's not coming out, it is a baby rabbit, a cottontail. Cottontails, again, are a very common animal in Hunterdon. They have a very short lifespan. They live about 2, maybe 3 years. But in that year, or in one of our years, cottontails can actually breed about 4 to 5 times. They do seek underbrush for burrows. And again, they are one of the prolific breeders because, again, they're a prey animal hiding from fox and other birds of prey. Potentially 2 things here. The first is the plant material in front of me. You probably all recognize it as multiflora rose. It's sort of a running tale here at the Arboretum because it was a working arboretum after World War II. Mr. Bloomer, who founded the Arboretum, did bring plant material back from Asia. One of the items he brought back supposedly was multiflora rose to sell it as a living hedgerow for livestock. So we joke that the parent stock of multiflora for Hunterdon County resides somewhere here in the Arboretum. Now I did hear, and I'm hoping it will play again, I'll try to be quiet enough, a black and white warbler. It sounds like a high-pitched weasel, like a wagon wheel spinning. Okay. It just called right in that space. It's a little black and white warbler that kind of makes you think of a zebra, about 4.5, 5 inches in size. Usually likes to hide along the trunks of trees, but can be anywhere from 10 feet to 100 feet up. So I don't have the ability to show it to you. In front of you, centered, is the gray catbird, making those calls. Very great bird, black cap to its head, a little bit of orangey color on the rump if you can see it. It's a very common bird, but it readily adapts to human presence and is one of the first birds to respond if you happen to do a pish. There's no pattern to its call. On occasion, it might give a meow-like sound, and that's the origin of the name, the gray catbird. Okay, this is an area I seldom get to on a seasonal nature walk, but it's one of the areas that makes me think of the old haunted forest areas. Again, it goes back to the nursery days. You can see that the plant material here is in lines. It's actually on both sides of the outer loop trail. But people often get surprised when they find out what these things actually are, because they don't look like this at all if you actually have them as part of your home landscape. But it's actually Japanese yew that's been let grow wild for about 40, 50 years. So it's not been maintained as a little bush design that we do in our landscapes, and the trunks have grown up and the vegetation is all out at the limits of the branches. But again, Japanese yew let go after about 40, 50 years. I'm on the boardwalk at the Arboretum in the wetland area. And if you can see the division in the skunk cabbage, it's one of the little streams that flow through this area. And why it's not always going to happen, they are worthwhile checking out. Again, I found amphibians along them. One of my best sightings was actually, I caught a mink moving through one of these creeks once. So take your time when you go through the wetland area and see what you can find. Again, it's a good bright day. There's plenty of birds calling, just not making themselves visible. In the distance, I'm hearing towhee, prairie warbler. See if it'll call again, because the prairie just called. Okay, if you heard that rising musical trill, that was the call of a prairie warbler. The other harsh call is the towhee behind me, and I actually caught my first house wren of the season here in the marsh. Okay, again, still on the boardwalk. An old naturalist colleague of mine who's long since left the county always made a scavenger hunt out here about finding the 4 plants named after animals in the swamp area. This happens to be one of them. It's called horsetail. Skunk cabbage you've already seen. The other 2 are actually an ostrich fern and the coarse cattails. But horsetail is a fern ally and is only found in really the beginning of the season, and then usually gets obscured and covered by later vegetation that forms in the marsh. So again, look for it down low. Look for a little bit of a plume at the end of a stalk for the horsetail. This is one of my favorite trees at the Arboretum. It's called the dawn redwood, but I jokingly call it the dinosaur tree. And I do need to correct a statement in the dogwood video. Only the deciduous hardwoods have a flower structure. Conifers use a cone structure as the means of reproducing, so these will not actually have flowers per se. But this conifer is one of the ancient trees on the planet. Its ancestors date back to the dinosaurs, because it does actually have a flower and does have a small cone. So this is actually before the split between true conifers and true hardwood trees. And if we walk up close, we can probably find a small cone still on the ground. As you can see, these are small cones, probably no more than ½ an inch. The dawn redwood is a cousin to the California redwood and the giant sequoia. So again, some of the oldest and tallest living structures on the planet all have some of the smallest cone shapes that exist amongst the conifer species.